Okay, so I want you to picture a scenario. You're sitting on your couch, maybe you've got a cup of coffee, and you turn on the news.
A very familiar scene for most of us.
Right. And there's a heated debate happening in Parliament or maybe a press conference with a very serious-looking minister,
Mm,
and they're talking about a crisis. It could be housing, the health service, a new railway.
the usual suspects.
Exactly. And as you're listening, you just get this overwhelming, really heavy sense of déjà vu.
Oh, absolutely.
You swear you have heard these exact same sentences delivered with the same urgency maybe 5 years ago,
Mm.
or even 10. They're talking about radical new approaches as if the problem just fell out of the sky yesterday.
It's that feeling that we are constantly at day one.
Yes,
Yes.
day one, always starting from scratch. But, just as a regular person, that there's this massive trail behind us. I mean, decades of white papers, committees, pilot schemes.
Hello.
But the conversation sounds like none of that ever happened. And today we are going to unpack exactly why. We are doing a deep dive into this concept of political amnesia.
And just to be clear right off the bat, when we say amnesia, we aren't talking about, a medical condition. We're talking about a systemic, structural inability for government to retain memory. It's a really fascinating and, frankly, a slightly worrying phenomenon.
It's this idea of permanent reinvention. That's the phrase that kept popping up.
Yeah.
Why do we keep acting like we're inventing the wheel every single time? And more importantly, and this is the part that really made my jaw drop, what is that actually costing us?
The cost is huge.
Because as we're going to see, the price tag on this memory loss is absolutely staggering.
It really is. And I think the best place to start is probably by clearing up a pretty major misconception. I think people often look at government failures and they just assume the problem is a lack of thinking.
Right. The assumption is just incompetence, like, oh, they're making it up as they go along.
Precisely. We assume it's an intellectual void, but the reality, according to the sources we have, is actually the opposite. The UK government isn't short on thinking. The work gets done, papers are produced, reviews are commissioned.
So we have the answers. They're just, what, sitting in a basement somewhere.
In a manner of speaking, yeah. The issue isn't that the insight doesn't exist, it's that the insight doesn't travel.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because that's a really interesting distinction. Having the knowledge versus having it travel. What happens to it? Does it just evaporate?
Well, the source material describes it as fragile memory. Think about it this way. Understanding tends to sort of thin out as it moves through the system.
Thins out.
Yeah. You might have a team of civil servants who deeply understand why a certain project went wrong in, say, 2015. They know the granular details.
Okay, so the knowledge is there. It's in the heads of the people on the ground.
Right. But then that understanding has to survive the environment. And the political environment is incredibly harsh on memory. It has to survive a change of role or an election. And this is the crucial part. That old knowledge really struggles against the pull of wanting to look like you're doing something new.
Ah, right. Because saying, I'm going to continue the slow, boring work of the person before me doesn't exactly fit on a campaign poster, does it?
Exactly. Steady continuity is not a vote winner. So lessons are learned, but they're learned locally and temporarily. They don't embed into the institutional brain.
Which leads to this loop the sources talk about. This really stood out to me. It says problems don't get avoided. They just reappear, slightly repackaged.
And this is a key insight from the text. The system doesn't remember failing. It only remembers starting.
The system doesn't remember failing. It only remembers starting. Wow. That's profound, actually. It explains so much.
It does. We end up circling familiar ground. It's not that nobody saw the cracks in the last attempt. It's that those cracks weren't carried forward to inform the next one.
We just pave over them and start fresh.
And then fall into the same hole 3 years later.
So if we know this happens, and surely people inside the system know it happens, why do we keep doing it? Is it just pure cynicism? Or is there something deeper?
It's definitely deeper. There's a strong human instinct at play. I mean, think about how you feel when you start a new project, or even just buying a new notebook.
Oh, I love a new notebook. The spine is stiff, the pages are crisp, it's full of potential.
Exactly. Beginning something new feels energetic, it feels clean, it signals momentum, it suggests agency. But now, imagine I hand you a notebook that's half full of someone else's scribbles.
Yeah, that's immediately less appealing. I have to deal with someone else's mess.
That is exactly what the sources call the burden of continuity. Picking up something half-finished means inheriting compromises you didn't make.
Right.
It means dealing with unresolved tensions. The source uses this great phrase, It asks you to stand inside someone else's logic.
That sounds exhausting. Standing inside someone else's logic. It's like wearing shoes that don't quite fit.
It creates friction. Before you can even act, you have to do all this mental work. Starting again avoids all of that. You get a simpler story to tell. You get clear ownership.
So this isn't necessarily politicians being cynical. It's just rational behavior within a broken system.
It's completely rational behavior. We've built a system that quietly rewards novelty more than it rewards continuity. If a minister announces a brand new grand strategy, they get headlines. A launch event.
Right. But if they say, I'm going to spend the next 2 years tweaking the last strategy to make it 5% more efficient,
nobody cares. That's page 14 news. Even if that tweak is what actually fixes the problem, the whole reward structure is skewed toward the new.
But this is where it gets really painful for anyone who pays taxes. This isn't just abstract. This has a hard cost.
A very, very significant cost.
I mean, actual money, staff time, years of attention. The sources use public inquiries as a perfect example of this.
And the trend is startling. The Institute for Government tracked this. Between 1985 and 2005, so a 20-year period, there were 41 public inquiries in the UK.
Okay, 41 in 20 years. About 2 a year.
Now, since 2005, in less than 20 years, there have been 63.
Whoa, that is a massive jump. Are we just making more mistakes?
That's one interpretation, but the source suggests it's a symptom of this amnesia. Because we don't hold on to the facts, we have to keep commissioning these huge, expensive investigations to find the truth all over again.
And they're not cheap.
Not at all.
No, I saw the figures and I actually gasped. The Institute for Government says completed inquiries since 2005 have cost over £730 million.
730 million. And that's just the ones that have finished. In the 2023-24 financial year alone, ongoing inquiries cost more than $130 million.
And the COVID inquiry alone.
That one's already spent around $192 million, and it's still running.
Now, to be clear, we aren't saying these inquiries are wasted money, right? The COVID inquiry, for example, is obviously vital.
Correct. We absolutely need accountability, but we have to connect it back to this theme. We have to ask, why do we need to keep paying hundreds of millions of pounds to reestablish the facts?
It feels like we pay to find out what went wrong, we get a massive report that no one reads, and then what?
That's the amnesia moment. We pay to establish the truth, but then the political wind changes. The minister moves on, the headlines move on, and the recommendations just quietly dissolve.
It's like buying the same textbook every semester, failing the exam, and then buying it again.
And acting surprised each time you fail. It is a reinvention tax that we are all paying.
So let's pivot a bit. What does this actually look like for people on the ground? You know, patients, tenants, teachers, the people waiting for these new strategies to work.
For them, the sensation is very specific. The source describes it as being always in motion but rarely building momentum.
Always in motion but rarely building momentum. That is such a vivid way to put it. Lots of noise, lots of press releases, but you're not actually moving forward.
Think about a teacher. If you've been in the job for 20 years, you've seen this cycle over and over. Every few years, there's a new curriculum, a new testing standard.
Right, so they have to stop, relearn the system, change all their paperwork.
And just as they get the hang of it, just as the reform starts to settle in, everything changes again.
Because a new education minister has arrived
Yeah.
and wants to leave their mark.
Exactly. The environment doesn't hold still long enough for anything to take root, and the source points to some really clear structural reasons for this.
It's not just bad luck.
No, it's the high turnover of roles.
The turnover's huge, right? Ministers shuffling around like musical chairs.
It makes it impossible to hold institutional memory. The average tenure for some of these roles is shockingly short, sometimes 18 months or less.
18 months. That's barely enough time to find the bathroom.
Yes. Now imagine you're put in charge of a massive department. How long does it take you just to understand the acronyms?
Months, surely.
By the time you actually understand the machinery, you're being moved somewhere else. So if you're that minister, knowing you only have 18 months, what's your incentive?
Quick wins. You have to prioritize quick wins.
You prioritize short-term things you can launch quickly. You have zero incentive to start a boring structural fix that will take 5 years because you won't be there to get the credit for it.
And there was another structural point the sources mentioned. These arm's-length bodies. What are they and why do they cause amnesia?
Good question. An arm's-length body is an organization that delivers a public service but operates independently from ministers. Think of something like the Environment Agency.
Okay, so the idea is to take the politics out of it.
Theoretically, yes. But the source argues this is another mechanism for forgetting. Instead of holding responsibility centrally, where learning can be consolidated, we push it out. We fragment the system.
So the brain of the government gets split up into little pieces.
Exactly. It fragments the memory. It means when things go wrong in one agency, it's much harder to pull that lesson back into the core of government to stop it from happening somewhere else.
It really paints a picture of a system that is designed to churn, but not necessarily designed to learn.
That's the core tension. Reforms die not because they are flawed, but because the soil they're planted in keeps shifting. We keep pulling up the plant to see if the roots are growing.
So if we step back, what does this all mean? We usually talk about political failure in terms of ideology. The left has bad ideas or the right has bad ideas.
Right, or we talk about competence.
But this deep dive suggests a third option, that a lot of what we call failure is actually a problem of continuity.
It's a problem of whether the system can remember itself long enough to improve.
And that's a tough realization.
Yeah.
Can't fix that with a better speech or just by firing one person and hiring another.
No.
Yeah.
You fix it by deciding that learning matters more than novelty.
Which sounds simple, but is a huge cultural shift.
It means shaping institutions so that learning has somewhere to live. You have to create incentives for politicians to finish someone else's job. You have to make maintenance sexy again.
I love that. Make maintenance sexy again. Put that on a campaign hat.
It probably wouldn't win an election, which is exactly the problem, isn't it? But until we value completion as much as we value starting, we're just going to keep paying that reinvention tax.
There is one final thought from the source material that I want to leave everyone with because it really stuck with me. We've been talking about this like it's an accident, like the system is just clumsy and forgetful.
But the source suggests it might be more purposeful than that.
Right. It says, we need to consider that forgetting isn't always accidental. Sometimes in politics, it's quietly encouraged.
It's a provocative thought. If you forget the past, you don't have to answer for it.
If the slate is always wiped clean, you can never be held accountable for the mess you left behind.
Precisely. It allows for a clean getaway.
Something to think about the next time you hear a politician announce a brand new solution to a very old problem. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.